West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
And Congressman Liu, I have mentioned this before in this discussion this week, that in some of the biggest, most famous prosecutions in American legal history, the defense side never cooperated. They never testified. You had to build a case without getting the criminals themselves to tell their story. And that has been done, and there are ways to do that. And this committee can do that. So as much as we can talk about the frustration of this delay game that's being played, the fact is that it is possible to conduct an investigation about what Mark Meadows did without Mark Meadows' testimony and what Donald Trump did without Donald Trump's testimony.
That is absolutely correct. Both Representative Swalwell and I are former prosecutors. And first of all, we both agree that the January 6th committee is doing an excellent job. And they are essentially building that case without these witnesses. They've already had hundreds of interviews with witnesses who have cooperated. They have received thousands and thousands of documents, including 6,000 from Mark Meadows himself that he gave voluntarily. And we need to ask, and the American people need to ask, why did Mark Meadows all of a sudden stop cooperating? What is he now trying to hide from the American people? And I think he suddenly realized that a lot of these documents he produced are very incriminating.
Well, Carson Swalwell, I love it. I love it is what he says when he's responding to the description of a criminal conspiracy to steal the election on January 6th. What was being described to him was against the law and was a crime, and he said, I love it.
Where have we heard that before, Lawrence? If I can give you stolen information on Hillary Clinton, would you like to receive it? Donald Trump Jr. says, if it's true, I love it. These guys love to crime when it comes to elections. And I would love to see them all held accountable. And it's not just a legal obligation that Mark Meadows has, because his lawsuit will go nowhere. He will be held in contempt by the Congress, and I believe the Department of Justice will also seek his indictment. It's a patriotic obligation. If you truly had nothing to do with the insurrection, the treasonous act that took place on January 6th, you would help your country. If you had something to do with it, you would do exactly what Mark Meadows, John Eastman, Clark, and so many others are doing, and that is acting like a guilty person.
Congressman Liu, the Trump gang for years now, led, of course, by Donald Trump, has been an attack. It's been a relentless attack on what we thought were reliable Washington institutions. The new institution that I see under attack tonight by the Trump gang, and the attack is succeeding, is the federal judiciary, especially the federal judiciary centered in Washington, D.C. We never knew before that if you got a congressional subpoena you could possibly sue the Speaker of the House for being part of issuing a congressional subpoena, and then buy yourself possibly several months, Mark Meadows will buy himself, of frivolous lawsuit litigation here, because the federal courts in Washington, D.C. have fallen into the trap of this game, and they are in effect will delegitimize themselves as enforcers of this kind of process.
That is absolutely correct. And Representative Swalwell mentioned the Don McGahn case earlier. I just want to note that we won a lot of those cases, but it took 2 years. And so Donald Trump and his enablers have figured out that they can use this delay tactic. And there's no other way to say this, but congressional subpoenas essentially are rendered meaningless if we can't enforce them, because it takes years to do so. And again, that's why I think we have to go back and rely on inherent contempt. That's one reason Congress executed it in the first place. And we simply have to be able to enforce our own subpoenas and not rely on the federal courts to take years and years, some cases, to decide these subpoena issues.
Congressman Swalwell, what we're learning in what has been revealed already from what Mark Meadows handed over is he obviously was using personal cell phones and personal email accounts while working in the White House and using those personal accounts for governing communication, actual governing communication. In other words, he was violating the Federal Records Act. He was doing what the Republicans accused Hillary Clinton of doing. I'm sure he was one of many in that White House who were doing exactly what they used to say was completely outrageous. And that's been exposed in what he's already handed over.
They're always projecting, Lawrence. And I also think of the Mueller report, where Mueller said that there were a number of blind spots in their investigation because of the apps that were being used, the number of encrypted devices and apps that were being used to conceal conversations. And the fear here is that they may have been doing that, and we have to find that out. I just want to put one fine point, though, on what this means to everyday Americans, to your viewers, because a lawyer called me earlier today, someone who practices in federal courts, and he was so upset. And he said to me, Lawrence, he said, I go to court every day. I tell the truth. I try and present myself with integrity. And what is it worth if people like Mark Meadows and others can just blow off subpoenas? That's the trickle-down effect, the collateral effect, is that if people start to believe that law and order doesn't matter anymore, then as a democracy and as a country, we're lost.
It is Thursday, the 9th of December of 2021. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well. I would probably like to mention that all of the criticism against Merrick Garland might be unwarranted. Unlike the previous attorney generals, and when I say that plural, I mean they went through a few of them during the Trump administration, and we know why. But unlike those fellows, Merrick Garland isn't one to get out ahead of the story. And what do I mean by that? I think that he's actually adhering to a prosecutorial norm that we have forgotten about because of the lack of normalcy during the Trump years. So I think that because he's not out letting us know all of the sausage making, that we presume that nothing is being done. But there's a lot of sausage being made right now. Also, I think that, yes, indeed, he's allowing the January 6th committee to do its work. And let us remind ourselves, during Watergate, a lot of evidence that came out in committee was not able to be used in a criminal proceeding. So part of Merrick Garland's holding back is that aspect as well, because they want to be able to build a case on their own for criminal indictments, and criminal charges and criminal prosecution that won't be encumbered by anything that may be revealed in committee. So, now we have Mark Meadows. What a fella. Remember when he cried, I'm not racist, some of my best friends are black. Remember that? What a weasel. We knew what a weasel that guy was. So, and apparently not a very smart weasel either. You would think with the kind of political experience the guy has, he would know what would have happened by penning a tome in which Donald Trump would have looked or been described as anything less than Superman. You're in big trouble when you let that out. He's not Superman? Oh, well, we're going to have to punish him relentlessly. So that's why Meadows filed all these lawsuits. I got to tell you, it sounds like a lawyer. They say a lawyer filed the lawsuits, wrote up the petition. But sure sounds like Trump going after Pelosi. An actual individual lawsuit against Pelosi. That's Trumpian. Mark Meadows wouldn't have come up with that BS. And of course, it's not Mark Meadows doing it, it's the lawyers. But I'm getting tired of these Nazis and these Nazi lawyers using our laws to F up America. Because that's exactly what they're doing, and they don't care. They don't care. So, we had we have that. And as Swalwell and Lou said at the top there, with Lawrence, it's not going anywhere. But I sure don't like the idea of the packed judiciary, packed full of Federalist Society goons, being able to pass judgment on the destruction of America. You would think that you could, remove them because of it. I would presume anybody who was discovered to be Antifa would be duly dealt with severely. Quickly, too. When I say quick, I mean before they even get up in the morning, there would be U.S. Marshals with a SWAT team banging down their door. Commies not allowed, even when you're not a commie. Yeah, they can go after commies, but don't you dare call them deplorable. Jeez. It's about time we started playing a little bit more rough. Had a, I don't know what it was, troll bot. Actually, I had to block it because I was just, I'm just tired of this shit. Excuse my language in the morning, but I'm tired of it. And this particular tete-a-tete occurred because of a combination of things about the vaccine mandate being struck down by a judge and, going after Kamala because of her paella pans. Do you know that the we don't even have to talk about Massey's guns. We'll talk about Boebert's guns. Boebert and her kids. One of those guns that the kid is holding, one of the kids, would buy about 3 paella pans that Kamala bought. Indeed. But these East Coast elitists, and she's from the West Coast. Even worse, I guess. That's not America. So we have the destruction of America occurring right before our eyes. Merry Savage Christmas. Yeah. And so we got Fox News more upset about their tree being burned by some homeless guy in New York than the January 6th insurrection. So, because some homeless guy burned their tree, it's now the Reichstag fire. Time to round up all the commies? All the Democrats, throw them in jail. They are the reason that America is going to be destroyed. See how they appropriate our language and use it against us? They use our laws. They use our culture. They use our language. And all the time, they're just laughing. Oh, I stuck it to the libs. I stuck it to the libs. It is Lord of the Flies, and these Nazis are the choir boys. Jack and Ralph. You get to choose which side you're on. I know. You could be alone, or you could be with a group of choir boys and tell everybody that, hey, now's the time to dance around the head of the pig. All right. And I'm talking about the movie from the late 50s, early 60s, not the recent one, or the most recent one. I don't think that one is as good. Just saying. Should read the William Golding novel, too. It actually, the earlier movie that I mentioned tracks quite closely to the novel. And I like that. So, we got the Fox News Christmas tree Reichstag fire. People are all up in arms about that. We have a Trump judge, Federalist Society judge, striking down the vaccine mandates all over the place because when infections go up and deaths go up, they can blame Joe for it. They just don't care about human life. Unless it's not human life, as we know it. They'll defend that to the hilt, to the point that when they pass the laws to protect the unborn, it pulls the thread on the whole fabric of our society and our Constitution, and we're going to go back to before the 14th Amendment. They packed the court with extremists, and they did it laughing in our faces. Kept Obama from being able to appoint not just a Supreme Court justice, but up and down the whole judiciary. And then as soon as Trump came in, they couldn't pack the courts fast enough. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's heart had barely stopped beating, and they were pushing Amy through. So that's what's going to happen. You think that it's just about abortion. No, it's not. You think, oh, well, now they're going to go after birth control. Of course they will. It's not going to go back to before 1973. It's going to go back to before 1830. That's where they really want it. Definitely will be losing the 14th Amendment. Separate but equal. That's what they're looking for. And that's what it looks like they're going to get. Because they know how to use the laws against the United States of America to pretty much destroy America. Hey, all sorts of these weird little headlines coming through. Cawthorn, Madison Cawthorn, that little Trumpenjungen Nazi. That's sort of redundant, but you know what I mean. Apparently took a political candidate for office on the floor of the House in violation of the rules. Well, we already have a story coming up about progressive Democrats pressuring Nancy to, punish Boebert. And why not Marjorie Taylor Greene, too, while we're at it? These little Nazis, all they want to do is throw bombs. That's all that they are. They are bomb throwers. And why we let them get away with it? It's not beyond me. I know why. But it's about time that we started thinking, punch the Nazi. Oh, yeah, we're going to be accused of being so violent. Well, as far as I can tell, we aren't storming the Capitol telling people how to be. We use the ballot box, but apparently that is the insurrection, according to Trump. The people of the United States voting against him, that is the insurrection. That is what has to be investigated. That is what has to be punished. That is what has to be changed. And over 71 million people believe that, and they got guns. Laughing at us the whole time. Oh, it's about hunting. Ha 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 ha. Hunting what? You have guns that if you were hunting, you wouldn't be bringing that meat home. Those are man killers, people killers. And they laughed. Well, it is about defense. Defense from who? And their idea of defense is to have a first nuke strike. That's their idea of defense. Nazis come up with that. That's why the GOP wants to have a first nuke strike. Damn the consequences. As long as it makes the other side look bad. I don't care how many people I killed, as long as we can stick it to Joe. F you, Brandon. Or thank you, Brandon. Lowest unemployment numbers or claims since, Jesus, when the Archies had Sugar Sugar. Oh, honey, honey. Haven't had unemployment claims this low since then. Sugar, sugar. Honey, honey. Yeah, I always wanted to do the Leisure Suit Larry version of the Archie song. But, hey, it doesn't matter. Look into the corporate media. You don't even have to, stick with Politico. Look at CNN, any of them, MSNBC even. And, they're not as bad as the others, but still. Dems in disarray. Joe is such a failure. And he has better job numbers than Trump had. And you go back and you look at the reportage on Trump, and they're like, oh, he's just now he's being presidential. Really? Now? But Joe, oh, what a failure. He's such a failure. The shelves are empty. And you go to the shelves, and they're not only full, they got pallets of stuff blocking the aisles. They got so much stuff, they can't even put it on the shelves. Kind of pissing me off. And it's all in some sort of political gambit. Then I came across a story about the abject failure of Republican states sending their National Guards troops to the southern border. And how these troops were arrested for rape, drug use, DUIs, assault, etc., etc., etc. And why? Because apparently they were non-commissioned officers that weren't part of the deployment. Yeah, go on down there, have some fun, kick some ass. One superior who went through the ordeal said, the whole time we were down there, we didn't see any illegal immigrants coming across the border. In a year, they had less than 30. A whole year. Think of all the money spent to deploy these troops from South Dakota. All to make the Democrats look bad. They don't care. Not one whit. Well, we do have a curated show. You knew I was going to get to that part. And why don't we? We already mentioned Swalwell and Lou's breakdown about Meadows' frivolous lawsuit. I wish they would hit Meadows with one of those slap suits, filing frivolous lawsuits just to delay. Yeah, it's like what Lawrence said. It's a one-sentence order. Decision. You obstructed justice. You are guilty of contempt. You don't need to wait until even April. That's what the prosecution said. We want to go with April for Bannon. Bannon gets July. Bannon wanted October. Oh, I'll just split the difference. How about next week? Telling Bannon that he's under contempt and you either adhere or we will incarcerate you. at a facility of our choosing, not his. Okay, enough of that. On the rest of the menu, the North Carolina Supreme Court has halted the March primary to review lawsuits over Republican-controlled illegal gerrymanders. Progressive Democrats pressure Pelosi to discipline Boebert for her anti-Muslim rhetoric that's getting Muslims beat up and killed. Yeah. And despite company resistance, a growing effort to unionize Starbucks stores is facing its first major test. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where New Zealand will ban cigarette sales for future generations. No kid under 14 can buy tobacco products anymore. Good. And Russian-speaking ransomware gangs claimed credit for an attack on an Australian electric utility serving millions of people. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. Do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It really helps. Now, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, we are able to pool those funds with what we pull out of our own wallets. We pay our bills, we fly under the radar, and continue this resistance against the hostile takeover of the United States of America. We find this as a civic duty that we take quite seriously, and we thank you for helping us fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. And really, all kidding aside, thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Follow me on... Tom takes care of the Twitter Netroots Radio account. Thanks, Tom. Yikes, got ahead of myself there. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Coz about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. And yes, and the show notes and links are very important because that's where truly the real reportage is. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Gary D. Robertson. North Carolina's highest court yesterday, Wednesday, pushed back the March election primaries for legislative, congressional, and judicial seats to give state courts time to review lawsuits claiming the Republican-controlled legislature illegally gerrymandered some districts. The decision by the Supreme Court comes after a state court of appeals panel initially blocked filing for legislative and congressional candidates on Monday, only to have the decision reversed when the full 15-member intermediate appeals court was asked to weigh in on the matter. Filings began Tuesday for those races instead. Now, yesterday's order suspends all candidate filing in the state until the litigation is resolved and delays the March 8 primary for 2 months. The Supreme Court says 3 trial judges hearing a pair of lawsuits must rule by January 11. The ruling will then likely be appealed. The delay is being granted in light of the great public interest in the matter and the need for urgency in reaching a final resolution at the earliest possible opportunity, the order reads. Primary elections for the U.S. Senate seat of the retiring GOP Senator Richard Burr, insider trading Richard Burr, and U.S. House, General Assembly, and judicial seats, along with elections for other local posts, will now be held May 17th, according to the order. The groups that filed the lawsuits, the North Carolina League of Conservation Voters, and math experts in one case and voters backed by an affiliate of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee in the other, have said voters would be irrevocably harmed if elections went forward under the approved lines. The lawsuits claim the legislature manipulated the boundaries according to the political leanings of voters, the racial composition of voters, or both. In doing so, the suits say, lawmakers gave Republicans nearly unbreakable majorities in the State House and Senate and nearly assured victories in at least 10 of the 14 U.S. House seats, starting with the 2022 elections. The state is closely divided in statewide elections. Republicans hold 8 of the 13 current House seats. North Carolina is getting an additional seat due to population growth, so the delegation's partisan composition could affect whether the GOP regains the House, the U.S. House, next year. The groups that filed the lawsuits want the courts to order the General Assembly to redraw the lines. The delay will allow voters to be heard in court and to hopefully establish once and for all that our state constitution forbids partisan gerrymandering. And that was the League of Conservation Voters Executive Director Kerry Clark said in a news release, "We will continue going to bat for voters so they will vote under fair maps for elections next year and beyond." Lawyers for GOP legislative leaders who were sued say the boundaries are lawful, created through a transparent map-making process that prohibited the use of political data in map software programs. They also argue that the Supreme Court rulings in the early 2000s allow legislators to consider partisan advantage in map-making. Last week, the 3 trial judges rejected requests by the plaintiffs to block the use of the approved lines, setting appeals in motion. Yesterday's order came from the entire Supreme Court, not individual justices. 4 of the 7 justices are registered Democrats. Over 1,400 people whom the State Board of Elections say had already filed across North Carolina this week will remain candidates for those same offices when filing resumes, unless they withdraw at that time, the order reads. Candidates filing had been supposed to continue through midday of December 17th. The ruling means candidates will have several more weeks to raise money and campaign before a primary. Ryan Slodisco of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. A group of progressive Democrats yesterday, Wednesday, ratcheted up pressure on Speaker Nancy Pelosi to punish firebrand conservative Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado, whose recent comments likening a Muslim member of Congress to a bomb-carrying terrorist they decried as a bigoted incitement to violence that puts an entire group of Americans in danger. Inaction is to be complicit in Islamophobia, said Representative Ayanna Pressley, a Massachusetts Democrat who is sponsoring a resolution to strip Boebert of her committee assignments. Without accountability, we embolden further action. A politics of outrage has thrived in the House Republican Conference in the wake of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. What? Their politics of outrage have been going on since before Reagan. Give me a break. But I know what they mean. When supporters of Trump fought police in brutal hand-to-hand combat as they tried to stop Congress from certifying the outcome of the 2020 election. Oh, there's nothing untoward about that, is there? Yeah, there is. But rather than discipline members of their conference who were making incendiary comments, Republican leaders have taken a hands-off approach as they chart a course to retaking the majority with the help of Trump's most ardent supporters. You know, the ones who went hand-to-hand with the cops. Democrats have tried to police the behavior of their own and have already this year stripped Paul Gosar, Marjorie Taylor Greene of their committee assignments. When it comes to Boebert, however, Pelosi has urged restraint, arguing that punishment will only give her attention and a funding boost. I don't feel like talking about what Republicans are doing or are doing about the disgraceful, unacceptable behavior of their members, Pelosi told reporters, adding that the responsibility is on them to do something. The approach has led to rising frustrations, particularly among progressive allies of Ilhan Omar, the Minnesota congresswoman who Boebert has repeatedly targeted with her verbal attacks. They argue that the rhetoric adopted by conservatives, including those in Congress, can have real-world consequences while giving license to discriminate. Omar says her office has reported hundreds of death threats to the authorities, many of which are made after she's been subject to a conservative attack. Other Democrats frequently singled out by Republicans, including Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, have reported spending large sums of money on their security. Boebert was cavalier when asked about the Democrats' press conference. I am aware that on Wednesday at 2 p.m. in Studio A, some people did something, she said in a one-sentence statement, which referenced the time and location of the press conference calling for her punishment. While Pelosi has been mum about whether she will punish Boebert, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, the number 5 Democrat, predicted yesterday, Wednesday, that at some point the House as a whole is going to have to act. It would be a constructive thing if my friends on the other side of the aisle would handle their own business in terms of out-of-control members, Jeffries said, but we haven't seen that level of accountability so far. The uproar over Boebert's remarks erupted late last month when the first of 2 videos surfaced in which she compares Omar to a terrorist. Boebert has also repeatedly referred to Omar as belonging to a jihad squad, as well as black-hearted and evil. In one of the videos, Boebert claimed the Capitol police officer approached her with fret on his face shortly after she stepped aboard a House elevator and the doors closed. I looked to my left, and there she is, Ilhan Omar, and I said, well, she doesn't have a backpack. We should be fine, Boebert says with a laugh, an apparent reference to her not carrying a suicide bomb. Republicans are unlikely to face lasting consequences if Republicans retake majority during next year's elections. Kevin McCarthy, who is in line to become Speaker, has floated the possibility that anyone punished by Democrats could get a promotion. They may have other committee assignments. They may have better committee assignments, he said last month of Gosar and Greene, who was punished for a broad spectrum of troubling behavior that included her endorsement of calls to assassinate prominent Democrats. Deanne Durbin of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A growing effort to unionize Starbucks stores, despite company resistance, is facing its first major test. The National Labor Relations Board is scheduled to count ballots today from union elections held at 3 separate Starbucks stores in Buffalo, New York. Around 111 Starbucks workers from the 3 stores are eligible to vote by mail starting last month. If the majority of workers at any of those locations votes to unionize, they could become the first union-represented U.S. Starbucks store in the company's 50-year history. Yes, votes could also accelerate unionization efforts at other Starbucks stores in the U.S. Already, 3 more stores in Buffalo and a store in Mesa, Arizona have filed petitions with the Labor Board for their own union elections, and those cases are pending. Union backers at the first 3 Buffalo stores filed petitions with the Labor Board in August seeking representation by Workers United, an affiliate of the Service Employees International Union. Those workers say Starbucks stores had chronic problems like understaffing and faulty equipment even before the pandemic. They want more input on pay and store operations. Starbucks insists its 8,000 company-owned U.S. stores function best when it works directly with its employees, which it calls partners. Many employees in the Buffalo area work at more than one store depending on demand, Starbucks says, and it wants to have the flexibility to move them between stores. Starbucks asked the Labor Board to hold one vote with all 20 of its Buffalo area stores, but the board rejected that request, saying store-by-store votes were appropriate under labor law. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth. This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. If you've ever looked up at the Milky Way, you've seen what's known as cosmic dust.
When you see this band, right, of the Milky Way, you can see these dark patches. And so that's really just dust that is obscuring the stars behind it.
Pascal Husch is an associate professor at the University of Geneva. He points out that cosmic dust isn't exactly the kind of dust you or I might be familiar with.
Cosmic dust is not quite the same as the dust we know, maybe from the apartment here. But it's cosmic dust are really just very small particles in the universe that are consisting maybe of just a few molecules, often containing carbon or silicate.
And as in that Milky Way example, the cosmic dust absorbs the light of stars behind it, making it harder for us to see those stars with instruments like the Hubble Space Telescope. But there is one way around that. Astronomers can observe the sky with longer wavelengths, using telescopes like the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array in Chile, or ALMA. With ALMA, astronomers can see even the dust bunnies hiding up in the sky, because as the dust absorbs photons from the stars behind it, it heats up.
And so then with ALMA, we can directly see the emission of this heated up dust, even in the very early universe.
Husch and his team have now stumbled upon 2 previously obscured galaxies using ALMA observations. The galaxies date back to the very earliest days of the universe, 13 billion years ago.
So those are the first building blocks, right, of the galaxies that we see around us in the universe today. So these are the first kind of Lego stones. And apparently we have been missing some of those Lego stones.
In fact, the scientists estimate that up to 1 in 5 galaxies may be missing from our current census of the early universe. The results appeared recently in the journal Nature. Hubble's successor, the James Webb Space Telescope, is set to sail off the planet later this month, and with its more powerful ability to probe long wavelengths, Ush is hoping it might bring our galactic census a little closer to completion. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Advertising has been characterized as rattling a stick in a bucket, a noisy cry for public attention. One example of this crass hucksterism is the rush by top executives of multi-billion-dollar corporations to splatter their corporate names on sports venues. Responding to a blatant scam by team owners, executives are spending absurd sums of their shareholders' money to win temporary naming rights to local stadiums, arenas, etc. The come-on is that this billboarding will buy brand recognition, customer loyalty, and even public gratitude for the purchaser. Seriously? Do you fly Delta, bank at Wachovia, or drive a Toyota because their names are on a big sports structure somewhere? And what do outfits like AmeriQuest, Qualcomm, and FTX even sell? And where are they located? As for public gratitude, ask Houstonians how thankful they are that global energy giant Enron slapped its name on the Astros baseball park in 1999, just 3 years before the corporation was forced into bankruptcy for being guilty of massive fraud and squalid executive greed. But the bucket-rattling name game keeps drawing new players. The latest entrants are purveyors of cryptocurrencies, the phantasmagoric here-today, gone-tomorrow form of digital money. One of these, Crypto.com, has just laid out a ridiculous $700 million, presumably in real money, not cryptos, to put its occult brand name on the home arena of the Los Angeles Lakers. Why? The parties to the deal put it in grandiose terms. A match made in heaven, exulted the arena's giddy owner, even proclaiming that Crypto.com will, quote, help us chart a course for the future of sports. This is Jim Hightower saying, huh? I doubt that this cryptic Singapore-based money dealer can even dribble a basketball. It's just rattling the money bucket, turning sports into just another corporate money hustle. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1958. That was the day 12 ultra-conservatives, including Robert Welch, Fred Koch, and Harry Lynn Bradley, gathered in Indianapolis to found the John Birch Society. These men saw cabals and communist conspiracies everywhere. They mobilized their vast financial resources to fuel Cold War paranoia. They opposed New Deal policies, the Civil Rights Movement, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, and the Equal Rights Amendment. They funded Barry Goldwater's presidential bid in 1964, denounced Richard Nixon as a fake and warned of his establishment of diplomatic ties with China. The Birchers also opposed water fluoridation, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They pressed for the U.S. to withdraw from the United Nations and viewed the U.S. war in Vietnam as a plot to bring communism to the United States. Welch, a candy manufacturer, even asserted that President Dwight David Eisenhower was simply a tool for the communists and an advocate of a one-world new order. More recently, many Birchers have also helped to found and fund the National Right to Work Committee, whose legal defense arm has pushed hard for anti-union legislation. Prominent members like the Koch brothers have funneled millions into the National Right to Work Committee in order to bust unions, kill the Employee Free Choice Act, and weaken the regulatory authority of the National Labor Relations Board. Their current headquarters are in Appleton, Wisconsin, hometown of Red Scare warrior Senator Joseph McCarthy.
Well, I run down most hurriedly and joined the John Birch Society. Got me a secret membership card, started walking off down the road. Oh boy, I'm a real John Bircher now. Look out, you
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States, where it is currently 34 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting only a high of about 40 to 41. Clouds and some sun this morning with more clouds for the afternoon. Winds light and variable. We did have a bit of rain overnight, and it looks like we might have a small chance of precipitation today. Cloudy overnight, lows in the mid-30s, winds light and variable. And then cloudy tomorrow with an increasing chance of rain, highs in the low 40s, winds light and variable. No need to report on coronavirus. Those numbers remain the same. We'll have an update for tomorrow. Pollen outside the window here in Rogue River is rated as none. The air quality index in the region is good at 30 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.14 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 45 and fair. Paris is 44 and fair. Rome is 51 degrees with a rain shower. Kyiv is 33 and cloudy. Kabul is 35 and clear. Hong Kong is 61 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 48 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 35 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. New Zealand plans to ban young people from ever buying cigarettes in their lifetime in one of the world's toughest crackdowns on the tobacco industry, arguing that other efforts to extinguish smoking were taking too long. People aged 14 and under in 2027 will never be allowed to purchase cigarettes in the Pacific country of 5 million. Part of the proposals unveiled that will also curb the number of retailers authorized to sell tobacco and cut nicotine levels in all products. Currently, 11.6% of all New Zealanders aged over 15 smoke, a proportion that rises to 29% among Indigenous Maori adults. The government will consult with a Maori Health Task Force in the coming months before introducing legislation into Parliament next year, with the aim of making it law by the end of 2022.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Joseph Men of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. One of the most prolific Russian-speaking ransomware gangs has claimed credit for a weekend attack on an Australian electric utility serving millions of people. Australian media reported on Monday that Chinese government hackers were behind the breach at CS Energy, which is owned by the Queensland State Interest in Northeast Australia. Those reports, which came amid high tensions between Australia and China, prompted the utility to issue a statement on Tuesday. There is currently no indication that the cyber incident was a state-based attack. The statement cited CS Energy CEO Andrew Bills as declaring. The ransomware group known as Conti, meanwhile, named CS Energy on its website for shaming victims and sometimes leaking their data. Senti listed CS Energy on its leak site, which obviously would indicate that one of its affiliates was responsible for the attack, said Brent Callow, a threat analyst at security firm Emsasoft. The Australian, the Daily Mail, and other media directly blame the attacks on China, but Callow said that Conti is believed to be a Russia-based cybercrime operation, not a China-based APT. So it would appear that the attack on CS Energy is simply an addition to the ever-expanding list of financially motivated ransomware attacks. ATP is security industry shorthand for advanced persistent threat groups, which are often backed by governments. Like some other ransomware groups, Conti splits proceeds with affiliates who break into targets before installing its program for encrypting computer files and referring victims to Conti for negotiating payments in cryptocurrency. Conti and other gangs have increased their attacks on utilities, hospitals, and other critical infrastructure in the past year. Western officials and researchers have said some of the groups have ties to Russian intelligence agencies, but no such accusation has been leveled against the Chinese. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.